I now look to Nicholas Leah, Secretary, Lincoln College, to continue the case for the proposition.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honourable members and distinguished guests. It is truly an honour to be speaking in this august chamber tonight on a motion of such importance. In 20 days, 2 hours and 30 minutes' time, we will have arrived at the 29th of March. And what a journey it has been. It has taken legal battles in the Supreme Court, a general election, a no-confidence vote in the Prime Minister, a perennial Conservative psychodrama, and, well, a faint-hearted contribution from Labour. But Brexit is almost upon us. But before that, we are here tonight to debate the same motion that will be put before the British Parliament on Tuesday evening: deal or no deal? That is the question. Noel Edmonds isn't here, but that is now the game we are playing. As a vocal critic of Theresa May at various junctures in the negotiations, I am tasked with the great challenge of defending something that suffered defeat in the House of Commons by 230 votes in January, the largest government defeat in 100 years. The difference between now and then is that time is in short supply. Time, that great currency that Mrs. May has been dealing in, is now more precious than ever before. 987 days since the results of the 2016 referendum, and here we are. Brexit has been like an earthquake shattering its way through British politics, the consequences of which led to the fascinating set of circumstances where political arch-rivals Nigel Farage and Lord Adonis now agree about something. But as I will go on to explain, there is no feasible alternative that they can offer you to this current deal. Now, I make no apologies this evening for my repeated use of gastronomic metaphors tonight. Brexit is like removing the egg from the omelette. Extricating Britain from the European Union has proven to be an enormous legislative and political task involving the rethinking and the re-legislating of manifold policy areas. Equally, it is not possible or democratic to argue, as many do, that one Brexit destination is true, legitimate and representative of the will of the people. This Brexit deal, like anything, is a compromise. I thank those who have contributed to the debate before me, particularly my fellow proposition speakers, who I think have really hit the mark. Their arguments have been grounded in the 3 Ps, as I'll call them: the pragmatic, the practical and the political. My speech is cast in a similar mould, not arguing that this is somehow the best deal in history, but that we need to make the best of a challenging situation. So whatever happened to proverbial British pragmatism, the direction of Brexit negotiations have certainly not pleased everyone. They have been frustrating, infuriating, and at times downright embarrassing. But British democracy is becoming healthier, ceteris paribus, as its citizens engage in greater levels of political debate and understanding. The Prime Minister has had a monumental task on her plate: how to turn the sum of 33.5 million wills who voted in the 2016 referendum into policy. This was never going to be easy. There are so many different versions of Brexit. That was the problem with the first referendum, of course. It was what Martin Lewis, our favourite money savings expert, has said was a black and white vote on a rainbow of issues. That is to say that even if a majority voted to leave the European Union, a majority might well have supported remaining in the customs union, or the EU's agencies, or Euratom. The initial question was fraught with potential mathematical contradictions. 2.5 years later, though, the Prime Minister and her ministers, supported by the work of thousands of civil servants, have formulated a plan for departure. It is easy to feel infuriated by the choice that we now have, to feel that the Prime Minister does not deserve approval for her negotiating strategy. She has continuously kicked the can down the road, ran down the clock, or whatever analogy you wish to use. Yet the reality is that we cannot go back to where we were in June 2016, when the Prime Minister had a clean Brexit slate. What we have on the table in the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration that accompanies it, although ambiguous in its language and in places devoid of substance, is a compromise. A compromise between the 52% who wanted out of the common fisheries policy, closer control of the nation's laws, money and its borders, and the 48% who wanted a continued trade partnership with the EU, indeed one that is wider and deeper than Canada or indeed any other advanced economy hitherto negotiated with, and continued cooperation on policing and national security. A compromise that can achieve what political commentators first said would be impossible to achieve: the prevention of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, something that is needed to uphold the integrity of the Good Friday Agreement. Now, the opposition have attempted already to trash the deal, saying that it satisfies no one. But then again, what alternative are they offering you? From Lord Adonis, a man who proudly boasts that he wants to overturn the result of the 2016 referendum, he wouldn't accept any deal because he wants to remain in the European Union. And Nigel Farage, well, you haven't heard from him yet, but if he was at the negotiating table right now, I'm fairly certain he would leave on WTO terms without a deal. And do not for 1 second be sold the snake oil that a no-deal scenario is something to be embraced. Market access to Europe is absolutely essential for British goods and services. You cannot simultaneously argue that it is all right to leave a free trade agreement with our largest export and import market and trade solely on WTO terms, because if we and others trade with everyone else, and argue that we must get back out of the EU to strike free trade deals around the world, because deliberately moving back to WTO terms from an existing preferential treatment represents a major step backwards to less free trade. So just have a look at the terrifying economic forecast if you want to understand what ramifications no deal might have. There are some real tragedies, though, of a no-deal scenario, of course. Leave.eu would lose its web address. How ironic. And Nigel Farage might have to make preparations to stand in the European parliamentary elections in May on his new Brexit party platform, preventing him from enjoying his retirement and that future, what is it, £73,000 future annual pension? What a travesty that is. But on a serious note, the alternatives that the opposition and indeed those in Parliament might be putting forward now appear completely untenable, especially at this late hour. A harder form of Brexit would not be possible because of the Irish question, the question where the interlinkages and tensions between UK domestic politics and Brexit aspirations are thrown into sharpest relief, because of Labour's position, and because of an increasingly frustrated pro-European fraction in Parliament, as evidenced by the creation of the Independent Group last month. A significantly softer version of Brexit would not be possible either, because of the large group of parliamentary Brexiteers holding the Prime Minister's feet firmly to the fire. There are no real alternatives available at this point, and even if there were, accepting this deal would be the best way of achieving them. And this is where the practical dimension comes in. One example in history affords us the opportunity to speculate about the UK's future in Europe, and that is Switzerland. In 1992, the Swiss held a vigorously contested referendum on membership of the European Economic Area. The result was even closer than the Brexit result, with 50.3% voting against the federal resolution on EEA membership to 49.7%. As the Swiss will tell you, though, once outside of the European Union, you are in continuous negotiation with it. Brexit, then, is not an event, it is a process. And the EU, while strategically myopic, is formidably good at process. And we need to be as well if we're going to have any chance of competing and negotiating with them in the future. But Europe needs us as much as we need them. By rejecting the deal tonight, we are effectively opting for a no-deal scenario, which will have major and unavoidable ramifications for both sides. Of course, Parliament have a vote on Wednesday evening to reject this path if it comes to it. But if the EU won't make concessions and the UK doesn't have a new plan, then it is still a likely scenario. And on the question of extending Article 50, well, this might even be a necessity if the deal passes. More time is probably needed for both sides to ratify the withdrawal agreement, whether that's up to the end of the current European Parliament's voting session on the 18th of April, not helped there, of course, by our own parliamentary recess on the 4th of April, or slightly beyond. The big problem with a larger extension, if the deal is rejected, is the European parliamentary elections in May. The EU is currently making preparations under the assumption that the UK will not be putting forward candidates, and it's technically impossible to see how the UK could remain a member state without elected representatives. And then there's the question of a second referendum, which, with the time we have available, as Amber has pointed out rightly, appears logistically impossible. Such a referendum would need to have been debated, be legislated for, and carried out all before May, at best, to give both sides time to ratify the withdrawal agreement and adopt a supporting domestic legislation if it is accepted by the electorate, and, on the other side, UK European parliamentary candidates to be gathered if Remain is an option on the referendum ballot paper. Who knows? It seems practically, therefore, and legislatively impossible to envisage a scenario where a second referendum would take place, which leaves us with the choice that I set out with at the start of this speech: deal or no deal. Accepting and rallying around this deal sends out a message of singularity, of solidarity, and of unity, which in turn affects how the EU perceives our strength and its willingness to make compromises. This might seem like a symbolic argument, and perhaps it is, but accepting this deal is the best way to bargain with the EU, with the limited options we have available, and this would give us the leverage we need to make future renegotiations and to settle the terms of our long-term future trading relationship past 2020. It seems, though, at this point, that Parliament and the Oxford Union have been trying to mirror one another recently. Both institutions have witnessed resignations galore. There was a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. There was a vote to impeach the librarian. And both institutions feature a doggedly stubborn leader, but perhaps admirably so. Above all, though, both Parliament and the Oxford Union are bitterly divided. Public trust in our politicians and our union hacks has never been lower. So we need something to heal those divisions so that we can move forward from this crippling state of political paralysis and get on with the business of governing the country and doing what the people of this country so desperately want, which is providing support for our public services and for our communities. But one final point, and this is on a serious note of political conviction. We should remember just how privileged we are to be able to debate this issue tonight in such esteemed company too, and in doing so, simulate the vote that will take place on Tuesday evening. That being said, I personally will always lament the fact that the electorate, now enfranchised and widened since 2016, are being denied the opportunity to vote on the final deal, as we are, albeit in the form of simulation, doing tonight. Given the practical constraints that I've already outlined, a second and final referendum, which in my opinion should have been built into the process from the beginning, is looking unlikely. For me, it seems inimical to democracy and the understanding of democratic consent that an electorate that voted for departure in 2016 are being unable to determine the destination in 2019. Only then might we have been able to have been judged by history to have been handing down to posterity what most closely approximates the will of the British people. And I leave you with the words of Edmund Burke. A nation is a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, those who have lived before us, and those who are yet to be born. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a special privilege to have served as your secretary this term, and it is a special privilege to have spoken in this historic debate tonight. Thank you very much.